talk about a couple NBA franchises, and one of those, as we know, the 76ers closing a deal. Let's talk a little bit about that and the deal as it is.
Yeah, subject to NBA approval, Bob, the 76ers were bought by another hedge fund guy, Harris. Comcast Spectacor selling it for just under $300 million. I was a little surprised that this team went for a lot less than the Golden State Warriors, which went for $450 million. That kind of surprised me a little bit. Philly's kind of a big market,
right?
But I guess a lot of it has to do with demographics.
Well, since I can't talk about the 76ers transaction specifically, since I was represented Comcast in the sale.
I tried to drag him in, you know.
Let's talk in general, okay? Very high per capita income in San Francisco. But even more interesting dynamic, as everybody well knows, the Warriors hadn't made the playoffs. They made it once in 16 years. But they really drew very, very well. They have a very sticky fan base. People continue to go despite the fact the team wasn't very good. In Philadelphia, obviously, that's not the case. When the team doesn't play well, it doesn't draw well. You have three very strong franchises that are also in Philadelphia. The Phillies are doing great. Everybody loves the Eagles. The Flyers, of course, are one of the premier teams in the NHL. And so the play here is that you need to turn this thing around. You need to get attendance back up. And obviously, that does affect price.
All right, let's talk. Let me just ask you a question, though. Should we be surprised at all, again, a question in general terms, that these teams are selling in the face of and amidst an NBA lockout?
No. The sale process for Philadelphia was started well in advance of the lockout. I don't think any of the prospective owners really believe that the current CBA is going to be better than the new one. So what they're thinking to themselves, I would assume, is it's either going to be a little bit better for me or a lot better for me, but I don't really have a lot of downside because the owners are pretty united in this situation, and I think this is going to be a pretty long and painful lockout.
Why is that? Because the owners are basically saying, look, we've opened our books to you. We've said we're tired of paying out all this money. We're tired of all these operating losses, yet the players' union, at this point, doesn't seem to believe it. Why is that?
I don't know why they don't believe it. I mean, look, the league does lose hundreds of millions of dollars. We follow generally accepted accounting principles. They do. These are audited financial statements. They lose money. I mean, I can tell you that a number of these teams are my clients. I look at these numbers. Some of them are very ugly.
I think there's some confusion, too, or that may be confusing the players, that you do see some teams like Golden State go for $450 million, a lot more than the previous owner had bought them for. Yet you see other teams like the Bobcats, they went for only $175 million, much less than the expansion price that was paid by the owner, Mr. Johnson. So there's a real bifurcation in teams. Some are making money. Some are being sold for much higher values than the previous owner had. So there's this widening gap, and I think that's kind of making things more complicated.
It is, and that's a very good point. What happens is there's a real split in value. The teams like the Knicks, the Lakers, the Bulls, if you put them on the market, you're going to get a tremendous frenzy of people wanting to buy them, and it pushes up the price. The bottom half, maybe more than the bottom half, the bottom 60%, the teams that don't make money, that have consistent operating losses, it is very difficult to find buyers for those teams. And the other fallacy is this. I buy a team for $200 million, and I sell it for $250 million, and I made a profit, except that in the 10 years I owned it, I lost $500 million owning it. It's not a very good business model.
Michael and I on the show have talked about in the NBA, there are very few haves, a lot of have-nots. And I think the have-nots, Sal, fair to say if you compare the NBA to the NFL lockouts, the have-nots have finally, they're waving the white flag and saying, we really can't do this anymore. We're in the NFL, even if teams were losing money and they want a better business model for themselves, they're saying, you know what, we're doing okay. They're smart enough to get it done.
Yeah, look, when you're making money, you want to play. When you're losing money, you don't want to play. If you lose less money by not playing than by playing, you're going to have a lockout. In the NFL, it's a very different dynamic. There may be one or two teams that have issues, but the bulk of the teams are doing okay, and they want to do a little bit better, but you want to play when there's that much money to be made.